Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at talking heads over the past week. Badly behaved children in pubs, fire and rescue services during road closures, and the direction of traffic flow on the mountain road were all on the agenda. But first, does your family still sit down to a Sunday roast? Over to Stu Peters.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
If you can't be bothered to cook a roast dinner, it seems that you're not alone. Research has found that the number of roasts eaten in the UK has more than halved in the last 15 years. Food historian William Sitwell says it's all to do with the decline of the dinner table.
In the 1980s, the 90s, the early 2000s, all you're left with is a breakfast bar, and you haven't got that communal dining space. And if you haven't got the communal dining space, you haven't got the mother or the father or the family coming together for that roast meal. So we end up losing roast dinners.
Is having a roast on a Sunday still part of your weekly routine, or is it a thing of the past in your household? Like I said earlier to Bob, when I was a young man, we used to go, even up to having the children, we used to go and have Sunday lunch every Sunday with my mum and dad. And it was great. It was just a good way for the whole family to get together just once a week and share gossip and news and things like that. And actually, thinking back, I expect that there were probably times that, you know, I couldn't really be bothered and didn't particularly look forward to it. So it is one of those things that you look back on, maybe through rose-tinted spectacles and think, oh, wasn't that great? Maybe it wasn't so much at the time, but I do miss it now. It's true what they say, you know, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. We still have a Sunday roast with a couple of glasses of wine, Stew, not every week, but very frequently, says Susie with a kiss. Thank you, Susie. And I'm pleased, I'm glad. You know, I think it's one of those things. I suppose that a lot of us have got, you know, the old idea of the nuclear family where you've got, you know, uncles and aunties and grandparents and everybody living within walking distance have long gone. But yeah, it's a lovely thing, isn't it, if you can manage it still. I don't know whether or not, I know that I talk about cooking on this programme far too much because I enjoy cooking. One thing that I've never been able to get the best of is doing a roast meat joint. Whenever I do them, they always end up tasting like boot leather, rotten. I tried, I think I did a beef, whatever it was, in the slow cooker once, and that was very nice. It ended up very tender, but I think it seemed to get rid of the taste. Taste all went into the sort of the gravy that I made afterwards. So if anybody's got any top tips for a foolproof way for a bachelor to make a side of beef or something like that on a Sunday, then do get in touch. Hi Stu, Sunday roast. Lots of us work weekends or shifts, so time is short for families to have meals together, not just Sundays. That's Martin in Onken. Yeah, I guess you're probably right. You know, we do all tend to have these frantic lifestyles these days. Quite happy to do a family roast in the winter, but spending hours in the kitchen on a nice day, no. Especially when it's scoffed in minutes. My lot love it, but still not as nice as my mum's, says Sue. No, well, food is never ever as good as your mum's, is it ever? That's just one of those rules of the universe. It's much cheaper to go out for a Sunday. By the time you buy a joint of meat, plus your potatoes and veg, it's actually nice to be waited on too. Yes, I can see that actually. It's not quite as relaxed as being at home though. But thinking back, my mother was a star really, because she used to do all the food herself and she used to do all the washing up as well. I think we sometimes offered, or sometimes she forced us to do the washing up, but I think most of the time we all enjoyed it, and she probably didn't very much, I don't know. In terms of cooking joints of meat, Stu, you're overcooking it. Well, that's probably true. If it's topside, put olive oil and lots of salt and pepper, cover and cook for around an hour at 180 and then let it rest. That would be a joint costing about a tenner. I use olive oil if there isn't much fat in it. Good luck, says Susie, with kisses. Well, I'll give that a try. So only an hour then at 180. I can't do 180 because the numbers wore off on the knob on my cooker. So I put another one on off another cooker, but it works the other way around. The knob that I've got on it at the moment, you turn it down to actually turn it up according to the figures on it. So I'll have to get a thermometer. That's the answer to it. Good stuff. Thank you for the suggestion. I'll give it a try. Hi, Stu. It's really surprising how many families don't even sit around a table these days, usually eating from a plate on the laps. That's true. To me, a family meal, roast or otherwise, is a great chance to catch up with everybody's daily events. It brings the family closer together. Very true. And having said that, a good plain roast with 2 veg, roasties and plenty of gravy, it's hard to beat. Kind regards from Wendy G. You're absolutely right, Wendy G. Yes, and I miss those days. It was all good, all that kind of stuff. It's just Facebook now. I stay in touch with Mike. We never speak, really. We just take the mickey out of each other on Facebook. Stu, the Sunday roast is part of our heritage, just like fish and chips or bacon and eggs, but like anything, if you have too much of it, you'll get fed up. In the end, we only have one family roast once a month on average, but but it's still regarded as the best meal on the menu, apart from Christmas dinner, of course. We've even started a herb garden growing fresh mint, rosemary, parsley, chives, etc. So the Sunday roast tastes even better. Good for you. Excellent. Stew, I always had trouble with beef, but a few weeks ago a friend told me to add about 5 tablespoons of water after it had been cooking for an hour under foil. Wow, tender or what? Cooked for about 1 3/4 hours at 160. Fan assisted. Ali, thank you very much. I've not got a fan on mine. It's just an old gas thing. But a bit of water, a bit of olive oil. I'm going to have to give this a try, I think, aren't I?
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should more be done to standardise the employing body for all government workers? Yesterday marked the start of a new era as a new body took over dealing with negotiations over pay and conditions for public sector staff. We're told terms and conditions won't be directly affected by the Public Services Commission, which brings civil servants and manual craft workers under a single employing body. It effectively takes over from the Civil Service Commission and the Whitley Council. Negotiations over terms and conditions and pay will now be carried out by the Public Services Commission Joint Negotiating Committee, which is made up of Government, Unite the Union and Prospect representatives. James Davis has been speaking to Chief Minister Alan Bell about it.
We started this process 2 years ago to improve working relationships across government, to coordinate terms and conditions, wage negotiations, etc., and to really modernise the industrial relations structure that we have in government. The consultation has been extensive. It's led to legislation, and now this appointed day order, 1st of September, heralds, I think, the start of a new era altogether in industrial relations across government. The Public Services Commission will cover about 4,000 members of staff, which is roughly half the government workforce. The other half, by and large, are bodies who have their wage and terms and conditions addressed by UK connections, teachers, nurses, etc. So they're in a slightly different situation. But over half government workforce now will be involved in the Public Services Commission. It means the ending of the Whitley Council, which has not necessarily been the most constructive body over the years to provide a modern approach to industrial relations. And therefore, I think it gives us a great new platform to move forward at this time of reform right across government in modernising industrial relations in government alongside all the other culture changes which we're trying to bring in.
So what do you think? Should all public sector employees be under the same banner as the Chief Minister just said? People like teachers and nurses, their pay is set in the UK. And I'm guessing that smarter people than me in government have decided that that's the way it should be. It doesn't seem that that's going to change any time soon. But do you think it should be? Do you think if we're employing people in the Isle of Man, we ought to set our own wage rates here? Or is it right that some workers are linked still to their UK bodies in terms of transference of skills and people from the UK and to the UK? Let's go to the lines. We've got Sylvia there. Hello, Sylvia.
Well, I think myself, listening to all these changes and this copying the EU laws and incorporating them into the Manx way of life when we're not members, not part of the UK, copy them. Not an original thought between the lot of them, just do as they're told. I think the best thing is to just close the assembly, and that's what the Manx government is, officially, legally. It's an assembly. So just pass us all over to a Liverpool MP.
Oh, you don't really want that. You're just being provocative now, Sylvia.
You can turn the House of Keys into a wonderful takeaway. Because that's all that's in Dublin.
A posh bar. Yeah, a bit like the courthouse, yeah.
Yes, why not? And then they'll all won't have anything to argue about. Nothing will be done. We'll just be given our orders, carry them out. Think of the money they'd save.
You're in one of those moods today, I can tell.
Honestly, it just drives me mad.
Well, it's a good job we're both getting older, Sylvia.
Yes, that's what I mean. It's the only thing age can give you is
a bit of perspective.
Experience and a bit of perspective and looking back and thinking. I mean, we nearly were part of a Liverpool MP's duties at one time because when Dumble's Bank went, the government had no money, the corporation had no money, and if Henry Noble hadn't stepped in with these bags of sovereigns and paid the Douglas Corporation all their debts and opened the Isle of Man Bank, that's what we would have been, and we wouldn't have known any different. It's just taken a long time to get to it again.
Well,
but I think we're getting there now.
I would hate it to happen. I know what you say, but I would hate it to happen.
Yes, but I mean, they haven't got an original thought. That's what annoys me.
Well,
And the population, the indigenous population, been squeezed out of existence and still maintaining got no rights to work or services in the European Union.
But businesses would say that it's important that we've got this Protocol 3 arrangement because it allows businesses here to do business with the EU.
I'm not worried about businesses. I'm worried about the indigenous population. I'm not worried at all.
But the indigenous population works in those businesses that are exporting within Europe.
I doubt it. Not many of them. There's only 27,000 indigenous population on the island. They can do what the Red Indians did, couldn't they? And just put us out on one of the planes.
Well, the way that you're sounding today, we're going to put you out on the ice, I think, Sylvia.
Well, I may be there already.
All right, good to talk to you. Thanks for calling today. They're all classed as government workers, so why not all under the same banner, says Rob. Well, I suppose that's the question, isn't it?
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should the mountain road be made one way during the Festival of Motorcycling is the question. Since its centenary, the road has been made one way during the earlier TT Festival, which takes place in May and June, of course, each year. For the event this time of year, which features the classic TT races and the Manx Grand Prix, the road remains open to vehicles travelling in both directions. But with the growth in the Isle of Man Festival of Motorcycling over recent years, should that situation be reviewed? A head-on collision on the road at the weekend, which claimed the lives of 2 visiting motorcyclists, has prompted the question to be asked. James Davies spoke to Sergeant Alan Thompson of the Roads Policing Unit.
Emotionally, it's quite tough, and our teams are tired. We're working long hours, and I've spoken to everybody who was there, including the people who support us, and it's had an impact on them all. But the days roll on, and we have to learn from these things and put plans into place just to make it safer up there.
Head-on collision, this obviously sparks the debate again, of course, about whether there's an argument for one-way traffic on the mountain road during this fortnight as well as TT. Will this prompt a rethink or certainly be revisited, or do these things, as tragic as they are, happen occasionally? I'm
open-minded about it. We certainly need a balanced approach. It's not always the best option because it puts traffic elsewhere. However, this is a very, very tragic event, and it has an impact on a lot of people. We'll sit down after MGP with the stakeholders and we'll consider the best options, but it has to be whatever is the safest for people who come to our island, because we want them to come back every year.
Should a one-way system be considered during the Festival of Motorcycling, or would that cause too much disruption? Could making the road one-way send out the wrong message to visitors about the nature of the festival? Lisa sent me a thing via Facebook earlier on to say she's not sure as she avoids the mountain road during TT and the festival. However, when the mountain road's closed for any event, the lights should be on at the bottom of Summer Hill. I think Bob mentioned something about that earlier on. Stu, the mountain course, I agree, it should be one way. Best wishes from Tony. Straight and to the point. Thank you, Tony. One way but no bollards needed. I wonder whether or not that would work. I expect that that's part of the problem in terms of making it one way, and that there's an awful lot of work in preparing for the racing and then putting the bollards back afterwards, isn't there? For your information, the thoughts about one way over the mountain was advocated 20 years ago, having been an official in the control tower with the late Robbie Kelly, who tried to instigate this in the 90s. That from Colin. Thank you, Colin. Stu, here's a suggestion. Why don't they permanently close the mountain road to Manx residents, as the road closed during TT, the MGP, then closed during winter due to snowflakes? Then the motorcycles can fly up and down just as much as they want. Sure, it's inconvenient to the residents here who pay road tax, but the needs of the motorcycles must be put before the needs of the Manx residents, says Pip. Well, I can understand that people get a bit fed up with this kind of thing, certainly. And I don't think that many people are aggrieved necessarily that the road is made one way during TT. Whether or not people would be upset about it being closed during MGP or Festival of Motorcycling as well, I don't know. But it does seem to me that, the slightest bit of rain during the winter, hail or anything like that, and the road is closed instantly. It's crazy. I mean, I spent a lot of years living in the Pennines, and you never used to get that there. The roads would remain open until they were literally impassable due to snowdrifts. I know nothing about motorbikes, but logic would state that a foreign bike taking evasive action will automatically veer to the right, and a Brit would veer to the left. When they're both travelling in opposite directions, this will result in a head-on, even though they're trying to avoid each other. One way for safety, says Susie. Thank you very much, Susie. Comments on whether or not the mountain road should be be one way during the Festival of Motorcycling as well as during TT. Somebody called and said, as a retired ambulance driver of 33 years experience, I think a one-way system would be a good idea for the emergency services. It's a pain to get to where you need to because you can't because of the traffic. I can see the arguments for and against, but at least with a one-way system you get the chance to get there at the same time as the police and the fire service, so it's a good idea. And the joint control room works well these days with the services in strategic positions, so they're never far from wherever an accident may happen, so it's a lot easier for the emergency services. But traffic isn't as low, or is that as slow as it once was, sadly. Okay, fair dues. Just an observation, not a moan, but it'd be great if the powers that be made even just a few helpful changes to the access road situation to make things a bit more pleasant for residents during the 4 weeks a year. Chop off those 2 high curbed corners by the large house, tidy up the road surface near the edge of the access road, install a sign at Pulley Bridge to let people know that the crossing point's open or the road is closed open, a remotely controlled electronic one, that is. Little things like this would help, says John. Yeah, good point. Stu, it's not about road safety at the MGP, it's about money. For the TT, the mountain road is one way as a safety issue. What makes it any different for MGP? It costs a lot of money to put down and take up the cones on the mountain. Let's be honest, the MGP doesn't attract the same number of visitors, so it's not cost effective. Double standards for this government once again, says Johnny. Well, whatever they do, they'll be criticised for it, won't they, Johnny? I mean, if they did decide to make it one way, people would be saying, why are they making it one way during the MGP? Because we've not got anything like the amount of traffic that we have during TT. They're just throwing money at it again. Stu, I'm in full agreement with Susie's comments. One way on the mountain during the Manx for safety. That from Jen. Thank you, Jen. Hey, boy, the road should be policed by real police. And it's not like they're really busy. They're never about when you need them, says G. I don't know that I agree with that. The whole thing should be abolished. Bikes are too fast, roads too narrow, weather's unpredictable, too much inconvenience, says somebody else. 4 weeks of the year is not a great inconvenience to me, as the TT's been here long before I have, and hopefully long after too. One way sounds like a sensible option for the Manx Grand Prix, and if it saves just one life, then how can we complain? Could be one of our friends or family, so let's keep them safe, says Nick. Thank you, Nick. Good measured view there. I emailed DOI last year about lights at Summerhill to be told that they weren't needed, TT or Grand Prix, says Christina. Okay, I don't know. I see the Steam Packet and DED have come up with a 4% increase in bike traffic for the classic TT. It's not being any busier than an MGP, but it's cost the taxpayer a fortune. Well, statistics would say that you're wrong. Government as a whole is responsible for this. It was a government initiative to increase the number of people to the event under the banner of the TT with the classic TT races. I'd like to know who will be responsible for issuing permits for the road closures and the one-way system in future when it won't be run by government itself as it is now. I believe it should be one way. The growth in the event and the number of people coming over is the direct result of the government's drive to grow the event using the saleability of the TT brand.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Are children misbehaving in pubs something that would put you off going out for a meal and a quiet drink? Apparently, badly behaved children are becoming more of a problem in pubs right across the British Isles. The issue has been highlighted in the latest Good Pub Guide and is now the main complaint from regulars. So, it's not just me being grumpy about it. Fiona Stapley compiles the guide. She says how to deal with little ones in public houses has always been a tricky subject.
The story for this year is about children in pubs and... You know, basically, although all landlords and landladies welcome parents and their children, and a trip to a lovely character pub is a treat, there is still a minority of children who spoil things for everybody else, and it's such a shame.
What sort of problems have there been then?
The sort of problems that there always are children running around unchecked and, you know, hooping around, having a very happy time themselves, but often tripping up waitresses, bumping into tables, falling over, screaming, generally being a bit of a pain in the butt. And the other problem is, of course, children screaming and not being taken outside by their parents, which, again, just spoils things for everybody.
Now, we're going back a few years, but whenever I used to go to the pub with my parents, I was either sat outside drinking a Coke with a cherry and a packet of crisps, or there was a separate room for children. Those days seem to have gone.
Yeah, I think nowadays people couldn't really leave their children out in a car with a bag of crisps and a horrid pineapple juice, which is what I always had. And luckily, those awful family rooms, which were the dreariest rooms in the pub and unheated and boring and drab, they are a thing of the past, so that families are genuinely welcomed, whether they behave or not, but they are, really welcomed, and into nice rooms as well. Quite often they might be a room just off the bar. Some pubs, landlords are dealing with unruly children by maybe either putting families together in a nice room, not one of those horrible back rooms, or they're sort of gently splitting them up and maybe having people who are having a quiet meal in another area. So they're trying to sort of segregate families in case there's a problem.
As a dad of two now, what advice would you give me to keep my boys under control?
I always said to mine that this is a real treat. It's a grown-up thing. You're going into a pub. You're going to be able to allow to choose your own drink and your own food. And for children, that's a huge treat. And I used to say to them, one squeak, and you're in the car with a bag of crisps. I mean, of course, I wouldn't do that, but it always worked.
Are badly behaved children in pubs a problem as far as you're concerned? Would you prefer to see children excluded from pubs altogether? Or is it important that the whole family is able to go out together? We've got a sign in our shop that says unaccompanied children will be given espresso coffee and free kittens. That tends to rein parents in a little bit. I've got a text here from Cliffy. We poor men went to the pub to get away from the wife and kids. Nothing's sacred anymore. I'm going to go and invest in a shed with its own bar, says Cliffy. Well, that's the thing about it, isn't it? Adults really need to have somewhere that is sacred, where they can go and have adult conversations and things and talk about things that adults like to talk about when they're together without having small ears all over the place apart from anything else. And children running around it is something that you want to escape from, I think, anyway. I don't know if you've got a point of view on this. This is one of my hobby horses. I don't know what you think about it, so tell me. And somebody who's prepared to tell me what she thinks about it is Jill. Hello, Jill.
I kind of agree with you. I hope you're sitting down when I said that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a case of, it's not really the kid's fault. It's the parents.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are still some parents who... So, you mustn't say no to children, which is ridiculous.
Completely.
They think somebody will come along and amuse the children while they're having their meal. Or it's all right for the kids to just wander off and annoy everybody else, as long as they don't annoy the parents.
Well, I don't think it's disloyal for me to say this, but 2 of my 3 daughters have got children, and so I've got 4 grandchildren. Middle daughter, she runs her family with military precision, and the children know where to sit and how to sit and when they can speak and all the rest of it, and no problem with that. Youngest daughter is much more relaxed about parenting. And to be honest, it's not fun to be out with them because I'm constantly on edge that, they're going to start running around and bumping into waiters and, ordering things that they're not going to eat and, generally sort of being naughty and, insisting on playing the computer games at the dinner table and things like that. And You're right, it's not the kids. If they're allowed to do that, they don't know any better. It's down to the parenting.
Yeah, and also, I mean, they're just not taught respect for anybody nowadays.
No, we're all very assertive about our rights and things, but less so about our responsibilities to others, I think.
Yeah, I mean, my kids, if I said no, they knew I meant no.
Absolutely, yeah.
And with I've only taken one grandchild out so far. I have got 2.
Yeah.
But, again, if Granny says no, it's no.
It was always a big treat when we were children to be taken out anywhere, to a cafe or a restaurant. Yeah. We'd never be taken into pubs because my parents had been publicans and they definitely didn't agree with children in pubs or anywhere near them. But if we went out to a cafe or a restaurant or anywhere like that, my dad was the gentlest man that you could ever hope to meet, but he had very, very strong standards about how children should behave. And, Mum was the enforcer in the family, but one look from Dad, if you started to play around a bit too much, and he'd soon bring you back into line. And I think that's the way it needs to be for the benefit of other people.
And for the kids themselves, for when they grow up, because otherwise, they turn into absolute hooligans.
Monsters. All right. Well, for once, Jill, we're of a mind, I think, aren't we?
Yes.
That's going to end in tears. Thanks for calling. More comments. Hey, Stu, misbehaving children are everywhere. Just go into any shop in town and see the little cherubs at their best. Basically, I reckon bad kids are a result of bad adults. Love the show, says Jonesy. Jonesy always says that. Pushing against an open door with that. It isn't necessarily the fault of the children, it's the fact that they're allowed to get away with it. Children are not the problem, it's ignorant parents or guardians, says David H. Yep. Badly behaved adults are a real pain as well, if not more so, says Rusty's dad. Yes, I suppose. But, I mean, the trouble is that if you're in a pub enjoying a quiet drink somewhere, in a pub, country pub, you're sitting outside in the summer, and you've got kids running around, getting under feet generally, shouting, screaming, making a fuss about everything, crying, and all those things that children do, then, you daren't say anything because you're probably likely to get thumped by the parents who get very sort of aggrieved if you even look at the children. My missus says you never see them in Corrie or EastEnders. What, in the pubs? Children? No, I don't suppose you do, thinking about it. It's good for families to spend time together. Some of my happiest memories as a child in the UK was all of us going to the pub as an extended family. Well, yeah, the sentiment of that is fine, but why not go to an ice cream parlour instead? That would be even better than going to a pub, surely, as an extended family. Peter called, badly behaved children are a problem everywhere, not just in pubs. I used to run a small craft shop and we had a little sign up which said, animals and well-behaved children welcome. Animals are delightful, well-behaved children are delightful, but children who misbehave, pick things up and scream, no thanks. Yes, Stu, kids shouldn't be allowed in the bar of a pub. Separate rooms are okay, but better still outside, preferably in the rain. Thought I was curmudgeonly. Steam packet boats used to prohibit them from the bar too, but now the bar's also a cafe on the Sea Cat and the brats are constantly running around annoying decent people, says Jeff. This is written in child speak, so it doesn't probably translate terribly well, but he says, leave us alone, Stu, we deserve pop and crisps whenever we want. That from William. I say, load the darlings up with sugar and e-numbers, then send them back home with their parents. That's from Evil Steve. I don't think women should be allowed in pubs. They're places in the kitchen. That's from Richie of Andreas. If anybody can find Richie, track him down, hunt him down like a rabid dog. It's him saying that, not me. I think a lot of parents fear reprisals or a visit from social services if they seem to chastise children who are misbehaving. This leads to kids having no boundaries. I think there's an element of truth in that. Never did me any harm getting a clip around the ear, a smack on the back of the legs, or getting the strap at school for misbehaving. Not that I was that bad, I don't think, says Jason. No, I agree with you. And I think that nowadays, bad behaviour seems to be tolerated much more than it was. I grew up in those times when children should be seen and not heard. I do worry that there seems to be a complete lack of discipline with a lot of people these days.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should a fire engine be positioned inside the TT course when the roads are closed for racing? The Isle of Man Fire and Rescue Service had a busy day on Tuesday with numerous call-outs to a number of contrasting incidents, along with providing fire cover in the pit lane. And an incident in Williston led to fire services having to use the TT access road for the first time since they've been unable to crew an appliance inside the course during racing. Assistant Divisional Officer and Deputy Head of Operations Jeff Quayle explained more to Howard Kane.
The Emergency Services Joint Control Room have contact with the staff from the Department of Infrastructure that crew the lights at either end of the access road, and I think they're fairly well versed in stopping traffic from one side to let the ambulance through. And I'm sure there's a great number of members of the public that have actually been sat at one side waiting for an emergency vehicle to come through. So from our side, we were able to give them about 5 minutes notice that we were coming through there, because the crew were coming back from an incident they'd just attended. And by the time they got there, they were just about able to go through straight away at a fairly reduced speed. But they were able to get through there with the minimum amount of disruption. Had that been a more serious incident, our officer up with the clerk of the course would probably have asked for the race to be red flagged, and then we have the facility to use the course itself to gain access if need be. But we do everything we possibly can to work with the organisers so that we don't inconvenience unnecessarily the racing.
Is it important, do you think, that an appliance is stationed inside the TT course during races? Or given budget reductions, is using the access road an acceptable compromise? Is the decision to not have an engine inside the course on race days that of the brigade or Home Affairs? I'm guessing it's the fire people that have decided this. Have they been told that this must be stopped, or is it something that's been decided internally to cut costs? Whichever, it's not acceptable and could prove deadly. The access road is not appropriate for that size vehicle during closed roads. Once again, the government needs to wake up, stop spending money on certain areas and plough it in where it's really needed. That from Marty. As there have been cuts to the fire service, perhaps it's time to look at how they could make use of unpaid volunteer members in situations like the TT. They have until May next year to train up a few teams who could work with full-time firemen on both sides of the course and give the cover that they think we need. Unpaid volunteers are widely used as backup in countries such as Australia, New Zealand and America. That from James M. Stu, if we can afford to man the helicopters for the races, surely we can provide a bit more budget for the fire engine. Geez, it's people's lives here. And that's from a very concerned Jonesy. OK, let's go to the lines because we've got Adriana on who'd like to talk about this. Hello.
It's interesting. My husband and I were talking last night. He marshals and I unfortunately can't because I'm working.
Yeah.
At the marshalling station, they have a person who is a kind of event management person and who helps to put the barriers up and those kinds of things.
Okay.
And these people are paid. So they're working with marshals who are not being paid.
Yeah.
And the marshals used to, for example, do this kind of thing before. And now you hear about the fire brigade issue. You know, surely as part of our cost of doing the TT, that should be costed in.
Yes.
Rather than have somebody sit, yes, the person has to sit there all day, but that person is paid to sit there all day and effectively just move barriers. We struggle every year to have enough marshals, and they are not paid. And yet you can have somebody sit there and all they do is just move barriers before and at the end of a race and get paid for that.
That'll be because we're in a very litigious society these days, and somebody will have decided that we need to have experts there to put the barriers up.
I accept that, but at the same time then, from a litigious point of view, we need to then look at, even if it's just for the period of the races, that the fire service then be provided with additional support so that they can do what they need to do.
Yes. It's a bit of a punt, though, anyway, isn't it, Adriana? Because it's all very well saying, well, let's make sure that we've got a fire pump inside the course. But if it was in the area of Nobles Hospital, for example, to look after Douglas, if you got a fire inside the course at Kirkmichael, it wouldn't be any use at all for that. So I don't know, really.
Yeah. I think we need to re-look at the entire way we're dealing with it. We have got medics and paramedics and first aiders sitting around the course who are all not paid. They are all volunteers. Our marshals are volunteers. And yet we can have people who do what can be considered really menial tasks, being paid considerable amounts of money on a daily basis.
Well, racing has always been the same, I'm afraid, car racing or anything. There are always people that do get paid and those that don't.
Don't, yes.
Yeah.
But, it's probably something that we need to really reconsider because volunteers are just that.
Yeah.
And
I have to
them every year becomes more and more and more difficult. I work in the third sector myself.
Yeah.
So I know how difficult it is to get volunteers and to get them to commit.
Yes.
So when you have paid and non-paid people working next to each other, it becomes really problematic.
I have to say, I do like your idea that, maintaining fire cover inside the course is maybe one of the on-costs of organising the event, and therefore the organisers... the organisers should have to foot the bill for it. I quite like the idea of that. That's very sensible.
When you red flag a race, it has other implications.
Of course, yeah.
And so, we really need to look at not being penny wise and pound foolish, ultimately.
I like the idea of that. That's far too sensible, actually, for this programme. But it's been nice talking to you today, Adriana. Call us again sometime. Stu would not like to be in the shoes of the idiot who cut the fire service budget if, God forbid, somebody was to lose their life just so that the MHKs can sip their Earl Grey in Tynwald. I'm furious on this one, says Miles. It's obvious budget cuts and motorcycle racing is more important to this government than public and visitor safety. Well, that's a bit strong. I mean, like I said earlier on, if there was a real problem, then they could just stop the racing and get the emergency vehicles out on the course. UK response times for fire in the UK, it's between 7 and 8 minutes. Interestingly, no info seems to be available for the Isle of Man, says Tony. OK. Just a thought, how about allowing 1,500 refugees into the island, a tenth of the 15,000 looking to populate the island with, or even 15,000 refugees? Well, yeah, but can they work fire engines? That's the question. Stu, looking at the bigger picture of disruption, many people are now saying how much of an inconvenience the MGP is to locals and businesses, especially when there are delays. They surely can't bring in more money than locals are losing. Don't forget, it's 4 weeks in the year with TT. Seems like a very long fortnight this year. A massive and unnecessary drain on the emergency services, especially Nobles. The cost should be passed to the race people. And, I mean, this comes up quite often, doesn't it, where we talk about volunteers and the fact that events like the MGP just couldn't go on, and TT couldn't go on at all without all the hundreds of volunteer marshals. But it's always been the case with motorsport that, you know, you've got unpaid marshals rubbing shoulders with people who are all getting paid to be there. It must be irritating, but people do it, you know, because they love motorsport. Stu, the helicopter fund is from donations, isn't it? Yes, as I understand it. If so, let's make it a helicopter and fire engine fund. P.S. Do they have ambulances inside the course, or are they budget restrained too? Asks Jonesy. 20% of fire service budget goes on pensions. Cut the pensions, longer working weeks, and 45 instead of 30 years to get a full pension. OK. Stu, if the red flag a race to get fire brigade to an emergency, won't they just restart the race at a later time and cause more inconvenience to the road taxpayers? Also, having volunteers to man a fire engine is impractical, as you need a person who can take the position of lead firefighter. This would be a salaried person. Why don't they just build a purpose-built track underground or around the outside of the island? There'd be no problems, says Pip. Yes, we'd all be inside the course then, wouldn't we, if it went round the coast? Stu, instead of wasting money on the horse tram lines, don't get me started on them, says Mal, why not use that money to widen the access road and have the bridge area on the road manned by DOI spectators? Sorry, workers. Widening the road where possible would assist the flow of traffic in both directions, says Mal. Well, thinking about the access road sort of along the Peel Road there, you're still going to be goosed at either end of that, aren't you? Because it narrows at both ends where it goes through the houses. I mean, it strikes me as the daftest possible place to have an access road, that, to be honest. But I don't know. I expect it's something that's developed over the years. BBC saturation coverage of boring dunk-donk Wimbledon inconveniences my televiewing, but I have to put up with it. As for cricket, don't get me started. Yeah, I agree with all that as well.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. As ever, our thanks to everyone who took part in the programme. If you'd like to have your say, call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or join the debate on the Facebook page, Talking Heads with Stu Peters. You can access each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of the Manx Radio website, and you'll also find a daily update of what's up for discussion on the programme on the website. You can also keep up to date with that information by liking the Facebook page or following Stu Manx on Twitter. And if you'd like to suggest a topic for discussion on the programme, get it to us by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.